So, Councillor Robert Alden, you're opposed to this plan?
Absolutely. What we've got here is a plan to turn a pub on the corner of Station Road and the High Street into a hostel. Totally unacceptable for the area, totally unsuitable. You've got 3 schools within a very close distance, as well as obviously the train station, it being a very busy junction where a lot of people go past. The application itself doesn't produce rooms of proper sizes, so it's not even good quality accommodation being produced. And it's something that should be opposed. And of course, all of that is within the context of a building that is set within the grounds of a number of listed buildings and really ought to be considered a non-designated heritage asset.
The building's been closed for the best part of 2 years, I understand. It was closed as a pub after a serious incident involving a Stanley knife. Is that correct?
Yeah, so it closed after a serious incident a couple of years ago because that pub company sold it, and the people who bought it have just been trying to turn it into a hostel or to a HMO since. And obviously, as local residents know, there is already more than enough HMO style accommodation in the area, and this just isn't needed. And it's a great shame actually, because it's a beautiful building and could be turned back into a very successful pub or restaurant if it was just given a chance.
So you're not opposed to the principle of hostels then?
I think what we've seen here in Erdington is that there is already more than our fair share of hostel and HMO accommodation, and that it isn't right to overload one area with all of those types of housing because of the impacts that can be seen from having them in the local area.
And too close to schools, in your opinion?
Absolutely. You've got Cllr School at the back, you've got the Abbey School next door to it, you've got Osborne School just down the road. This is a very sensitive location that needs to be handled properly, and when you take into account the heritage situation as well, it just isn't a suitable application for this location.
As far as the pub's concerned, I mean, from the research that I've been doing today, that there is a lot of support for restoring the pub to its former glory. I mean, it's been there for 200 years.
Absolutely. I think it would be very popular if someone managed to get hold of it and ran it as a decent quality pub. It would do well, I think, because up until the trouble in the sort of last year with the Cross Keys, generally that seemed to work quite well. We didn't get many complaints from it as local councillors.
Yeah, previous governor there was a man named Mickey Carpenter, who ran the Cross Keys. He's moved on since. He's still in the pub trade, but he's 100%, 110%, he says, certain that the pub can come back and be successful.
Absolutely, and as he said, it made a lot of money when it was operating as a pub.
Okay, all you need is a gaffer who would be strict enough to keep the riffraff out, and the people would flock back to the Cross Keys, is what he's been saying, and locals have been saying as well. There's a consultation on what to do with the site, isn't there? It's due to close on Tuesday.
Yeah, so that's the planning consultation where, so it's considering the application that's been put in, and obviously anyone who wants to comment has got until Tuesday to make sure they contact Birmingham Planning Department to put in their comments and make sure their voice is heard. I'm
going to play devil's advocate because I wouldn't be doing my job properly if I didn't. We've talked on interviews in the past. I've always tried to put the other side to that. Pre-lockdown, the council published the figures for the number of homeless across Birmingham in a snapshot, and were shouted from the rooftops about how well it's coming down, homelessness. Obviously, if you are in that position and you spend your time in a hostel, I need to ask you this actually: does your status as homeless change if you go into a hostel?
So it would depend on the type of the accommodation as to what that would do to your status or not. So whether it was permanent accommodation or temporary accommodation.
Right. So if this
who put you there basically? Did you go in?
Okay. So if this plan for the hostel were to go ahead, and there's been talk about some maybe some undesirable characters could be attracted to this hostel, but that's been refuted in other circles as well. Wouldn't that help in helping get those homeless figures down even further, which the council say they were doing so well?
Well, I mean, there's nothing that I've seen that says this hostel is going to be used for that purpose. So I think that's two different issues being confused there. But I think the sad reality is that we've seen across Erdington that where you have hostels, there has been significant trouble over the years that has had a negative impact on our local area. And when you look around both the Erdington ward and the wider Erdington area, and you see the number of hostels there already are, it is clear that our area has already taken its fair share of hostels for the city, and if that accommodation was needed, it should go elsewhere. But the reality is, when you look around Erdington, you can see there is plenty of spaces in that kind of accommodation already, so we don't need additional spaces.
Fairfield Fox are the entity who are pushing for this hostel. They reject any suggestion that it would lead to an increase in crime or full of undesirables. If they're listening to this now, what's your message to them?
What I would say to them is there is plenty of really good uses for this building. It could be turned into office space, be turned back into a pub, it could be turned into a restaurant. Look at one of those kind of uses that the public would get behind and really support you in doing, rather than something which you're having to go loggerheads with the local community.
Thanks to our friends at Erdington Local who supplied us with the story. From their Facebook page, a few have given their views. I'm going to share those with you just now. Hevs Bell, name on Facebook, the Erdington councillor needs to support campaigns to fund local social services and housing provision if he's so concerned.
Well, what you'll have seen in the local area, if you live in a local ward, is we've actually delivered hundreds of new houses in the time where I've been a councillor. So just up the road from this site on the former Lyndhurst estate, it's now the Abbeyfields estate, that has gone through tens of millions of pounds worth of regeneration, where all of the old maisonettes, all the boarded up housing has been demolished and replaced with good quality modern houses that are spacious so that people have a good quality home to live in. And that's the really key thing. It's not about getting people just into any old accommodation. It's about getting people into good accommodation. And that's one of the concerns about this application here on the Cross Keys. When you look at the plans, it is very small room sizes. It is not good quality accommodation. We think people in Erdington deserve much better than that kind of room standards.
Councillor Robert Alden, thank you for joining us.